But I really appreciate you popping on the show, man. It's been a while since our interview that we did for
Yeah,
Freddie.
yeah, that was 6 or 8 months ago, or maybe even longer than that. It was about the housing crisis, the affordability, end of the American dream. I mean, just very uplifting topics.
It was uplifting. Dude, I went through a process where I was kind of taking to heart when people would say like, "Hey, this is kind of like depressing." And I was like, "Well, I'm just kind of reporting the facts. This is kind of what's happening." And now it's very apparent. I think to everybody. I think a year ago it was still maybe not as hadn't hit everyone yet. Are you on the side of the economies in the crapper, or do you see some hope?
I mean, I see your videos all the time. I see your breakdowns quite often, I feel. But I think, yeah, I think mostly I mean, you could see it with the reaction to Katy Perry's space flight. Like, people are not happy with, you know, people who are wealthy because you can't support that, or you can't enjoy that if your life is like, I can't buy eggs, you know?
Yeah, dude. No, I feel you. I think that's why I'm so excited to chat with you today too. I got a list of questions here. I'm a huge fan of your TikTok. You
Oh,
come up all the
appreciate it.
time, and it's such a deep dive. I love how you utilize green screen in articles. I think that's so important because it shows like you're doing kind of like a show and tell, and I think it helps people really be educated. Um, on your journey of independent journalism, was that something you were always interested in? Did you do that growing up, or was there a turning point in your life that you go, wait a minute, I need to look into this? Like, where did your story start with all the independent journalism?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of different awakenings that I had just through my life. So the first one, probably, I don't know if people know this or not, but back in 2016, I was a big Bernie guy. That was like my first awakening into politics. Even though I had studied political science as an undergrad, I wasn't too into it. I didn't pay that close of attention to it. There were a lot of things that were happening on campus when I was in college, protests and everything like that. I stayed far away from that. I was partying, I was hanging out with my buddies. And it wasn't until Bernie I said, wow, everything that was taught about politics, which is basically that the Democrat Party was good and the Republican Party was bad. I That was the first time I saw how authoritarian the Democratic Party could be in terms of them not listening to their voter base in choosing the candidate and running the primary the way they did. That was probably the that first inkling of like, okay, things are wrong. But then after that, I went to business school. I went and got an MBA at NYU, and that was when the indoctrination of the whole business thing happened, where all the professors, all the messaging was like, okay, you can use business to improve society. That's what we're here for. We're going to go and create wealth for people, and we're going to go basically all the, what's that saying, the rising tide raises all boats kind of philosophy. And then I worked in management consulting for 4.5, almost 5 years, consulting for major Fortune 500 companies, mainly in big pharma, but I also dabbled in um, diversified manufacturing, all kinds of different big companies that everybody's heard of that I guess, not allowed to mention, but
Yeah.
due to NDAs or whatnot. But it was during the COVID that I had my second awakening to say, oh, wow, I guess businesses don't really care about people in society. They just care about their profits. And I saw that, and it just so happened that I was working in big pharma at the time, and I saw behind the scenes of some of the internal data around the vaccine, and the way they were discussing vaccines in regards to profit versus vaccines in regards to life-saving medical intervention. And that's when it was in May of 2020 when I first posted my first video on YouTube. Because before that, I was so busy. I was traveling. In 2019, I spent 200, I think it was 200 plus nights on the road as a consultant. So I was all over the place. And when COVID hit, we were just shut down. There's no more travel. And all of a sudden, I had all this free time that I used to travel. And so then I started just doing videos online. And at that point, I think even now, I feel like some of the videos that I make I'm just scratching the surface of different topics. But that was when I said, okay, maybe things aren't the way I thought they were. And this has been kind of a 4.5, 5 year journey to where I am now.
Dude, I think that is very common amongst younger folks. I feel because when I grew up, politics weren't really big in my house. I kind of was very oblivious. Sad
Yeah.
to say, I was kind of ignorant. Like when I was 21, if you'd asked me questions, I would have had no clue. But I think the 2016 is where the tide turned, and then COVID, people kind of made their decision, and it got us into I think the misinformation or the propaganda or the narrative of the mainstream media that we felt it was dishonest forced people into wanting to find alternative sources. Do you think that was also the catalyst of why independent journalism and TikTok videos, YouTubers, podcasts have become people's go-to for information? Like, what do you think that hunger is rather than the mainstream media?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that can be explained by the rise of podcasts and independent media. I think one is the medium in which we consume media is different, right? It used to be just television, and they had kind of a monopoly on who could broadcast on television. Then you had the advent of YouTube and other platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and things like that. And regular people could post to the internet and have their own perspective on things. So it's more of, I think, the democratization of distribution allowed for more people to have a voice. And now what we're seeing, though, with this democratization is a pushback against this from the establishment players to say, well, these voices are dangerous. These voices are spreading information that may or may not be true, which is certainly the case some of the time. But I would say that traditional media has definitely also spewed lies of their own. It's just that they were allowed to spew the lies that they liked, versus some of these lies are maybe inconvenient for some certain narrative direction that they're trying to take. And so I think that's where we are now. But I would caution people to kind of view independent media from a more critical lens to say, are these people who you're seeing on TikTok that look like they're in their living room, are they actually independent or not? Or are they supported by a large organization behind the scenes and they want to look independent? I'm not going to name any names. I've made videos about this, but that's kind of what's happening right now in independent media. If you do gain some notoriety, some audience, like yourself, I'm sure you get offers of say, hey, we're going to go ahead and give you a nice cushy life. There's some issues that we want to talk about in this kind of way. But other than that, you are 100% independent. And we just don't want you to kind of touch on this issue. Or when the time comes, when we give you that tap on the shoulder, this is the candidate who you're going to endorse. These kinds of things are happening behind the scenes.
I'm hearing that a lot lately. People are coming forward talking about how they're being offered. And it's weird because it seems dishonest because you kind of don't even have to have sponsored post on it. And so people, like you said, it just seems like the mainstream or whoever's in charge figured that out. Let's infiltrate independent journalism with plants to push this narrative, and you don't even really have to say it's sponsored or anything like that, because I guess it's hard to pinpoint that because it's not like you're pushing a soap or a drink as an actual ad. But I think that's also going to get itself worked out. I think we're making progress. Do you feel that there is progress, though, that there are names that are coming up that are doing great journalism like yourself? And how do you separate in this chaotic world where people don't have 20 hours a day to look at every story of what's true? How do you decipher, and how could someone else decipher, this is real facts or this is twisted? Because even myself, I'll wait to see a story 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times from different sources before I actually believe it. If I just see one TikTok video, I'm like, it's a coin toss. I better not make a video until I really know, because I'll get dragged through the coals. Where do you go to even make sure that it's a fact when you're making the videos?
Well, there's a couple things that people could do, because I understand that people don't have a ton of time. This is like not their thing, so they're not in it all day long. And I would say that you yourself, and unfortunately, I would say, hey, you need to listen to people and follow people with different ideas. So if you have on a specific topic, you should follow one guy that says A and another guy that says the complete opposite, and then see where you're like, and see where your brain kind of falls in terms of like who's telling the truth or not. Because I think a lot of times the truth is probably somewhere in between. Just because even when I make content, just out of full disclosure, there is a little bit of a balance between maybe facts and cold hard facts versus entertainment. There's a kind of a blend between the two to make the video interesting. If it's just facts, it's not necessarily that interesting to watch. So there is some narrative that I'm injecting into my videos that I wouldn't say are not true, but they certainly don't necessarily tell the whole story. It tells my side of the story. And then there's other creators that maybe are on the other side of the spectrum, and they may view the exact same issue through a different lens. And then you can decide who's bullshitting you or not. Because that I think the human brain is very good at. You can kind of know who's kind of BSing on a particular topic, and that you kind of just trust your instincts on that. And then over time, you can learn, hey, this is a creative that I trust. They have good instincts, they have good morals, they have good judgment, good editorial decision making to say, this person is going to tell me not necessarily the whole truth, but everything he says is not going to be completely made up and fabricated. And that's kind of how you can suss that out through time. Um, and then overall, I think you'll know who's being paid to say something, who's not, because of the arguments that they're making. It just doesn't sound right. And I've seen a lot of comments, because I'll go through and read comments of not just my own videos, but people's other people's videos, and people are, they're kind of on the nose. They're spot on with, it's like, hey, this doesn't sound right. And they'll call them out on that. And that's kind of the beauty of this kind of democratized media platform, is that even if there is misinformation, the people are correcting it in the comments right away. And I see that versus having this kind of gatekeeping where only certain voices are allowed to speak. If you're too on the fringe, now you're not speaking anymore. I just saw a clip of Jordan Peterson going on Joe Rogan to ask him, well, how do you make sure that the people coming on your show are good people? Where are the guardrails, right? And I would say, well, I don't know. I don't necessarily want elite, top down people with power to decide where the guardrails are. I want the people to decide whether or not this information is good or not.
And it gives you kind of a pulse of the actual country. Like, most people aren't experts, most people aren't elite, but that's most of the country, and you kind of want to hear what people feel about this. And then the people in charge should be able to get a pulse of all of us saying, hey, we're complaining about this or this. Are you listening? Instead of, talking down to us. Like, I see a lot of people too who are like in the elite positions or Ivy League sometimes, when they just have this condescending tone that I know so much more than you because I've been to this, I've been to that. And I don't think it's healthy. But I just want to try to heal the country in a way to get us to talk. And even with the implementation of deep fakes, I don't know if you saw this recently. I saw a clip of Bernie Sanders. It was the best deepfake I've yet to see, where he was telling people to invest your life savings into gambling. And
I hadn't seen that.
Yeah, it was so preposterous that I knew he wasn't saying it, but it was the closest real deepfake that I have ever seen, where I was like, if someone didn't know, they're going to get this. So misinformation, I feel, is going to get even crazier. Do you have any idea of what the next few years will look like, or the next 5 years with all of this information? Like, how do we streamline facts like maybe we used to back in the day, so that Americans can get the facts? Because I think that's the whole reason we're divided, is that we can never come to terms because we have two different facts.
Well,
Like,
so that I think that's, yeah, I would say we have to. I think there's going to be deep fakes at very, very soon that we literally cannot tell, like, between if it was a human or if it was an AI generated version of that human. I don't think we're going to be able to discern with our naked eye the difference. And I believe at this point, my hope is that, and I think this is kind of happening, I see it happening in real life, is that people are kind of rejecting the AI stuff and saying, no, I want to only really watch or support content from people that I know that are real people. And I think there's going to be a market balance, because there's a lot of AI generated content right now that's kind of, I would consider, slop. That's designed to hook you, and it's manipulating the way you think and stuff like that. And I think that's going to work for a little while, but I truly do think as humans we crave connection with other humans. We don't crave connections with robots. So I don't think it's ever going to resonate in that sense. Now, are people going to be able to run some kind of disinformation campaign using a fake, let's say the fake video of Bernie? It's possible, but I truly believe that enough people are going to watch those videos, if they do go viral, to say, okay, that's not a real video. And I have to believe that, because I am, true to my morals, I do believe in free speech. I don't think there should be that many guardrails around free speech. So I'd say, hey, if they want to put out a fake disinformation video, then we need to just put out a correction video and see which one makes more noise.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my hope, man. That's why I just love what you do, because it's I have my favorite people that I trust, that I go to, that I get excited to watch the videos. And after a while, I think some of these bad actors, when you see that it's dishonest and then dishonest again and then dishonest again, you kind of instantly just move by. They destroyed their credibility. And I think that's what happened with mainstream. They just lied and twisted the narrative so much that I go, the truth's in there somewhere, but that's definitely not the story. It's a headline that's going to get the clicks and all that stuff. Um, one of the most interesting videos that you talked about was the homeless crisis. I believe it was just solely in LA. Maybe it was for the nation. I was trying to find the exact clip, but I lived in Los Angeles for 15 years. So I saw firsthand the growth of the homeless crisis. And in 2019, into 2020 was the last year that I was living in an apartment. And the first 6 months of us living there, my wife and I, we were able to walk under this overpass and go to these like 2 restaurants. Within 6 months, the overpasses were covered with tents, and they even brought in porta potties, which I thought was pretty cool of the city just to keep everything like sanitary. But it was just crazy because it was an expensive area. And every single underpass in 2020, before the pandemic, it started to get really bad. And then I left. So I can't imagine, other than the videos I've seen in Venice, Santa Monica, how bad it's gotten. So I see all this. I was there, witnessed it for years. And then I see articles that California spent 10 billion or 20 billion or 50 million here, 100 million here, and yet it doesn't seem to be getting better. What is your take on where that money is going? Is it being helpful? Like can you clarify some of that for us? Like, what's going on with the billions of dollars that should be helping the homeless people?
Absolutely, yeah. So that my take on that, and the exact number I believe is $24 billion over the last 5 years in California. And if you do the math on that and divide by the number of homeless people, we could have given each homeless person annually, I believe, over $100,000 if that money were just to go cash directly to the homeless. But that's not what happened, because in California, what happens is that there's all of this. If we can't just present a solution, the solution has to make people money, it seems like. And that's kind of the leadership of Gavin Newsom. He talks sort of a big game on, oh, we're going to solve this, we're going to do that. But he has his group of friends that he has to cater to, whether they be donors or very, close family members and these kinds of things. And that's how things are done in California. It really is kind of I don't know what you call it, but an oligarchical system where there's people on the in, and they really need to get their cut of the whole thing. So what's happening with this homeless situation? They're creating the solution by giving these handouts to their industry friends. So one example of that would be, okay, we need to house these people. So now we're going to create low-income housing. So how they do the low-income housing is that there are these huge real estate projects, these kind of luxury condos, and they say, well, we're going to give you some tax breaks. We're going to fund part of it, but you need to give a section of it to low-income housing, to these homeless people, so we can house people. And it's not even that much. It's maybe 8-10% of the units need to be for low-income housing. And then now the real estate people get their project funded, subsidized by the government with tax breaks. And then they can say, okay, we're also helping out the community by providing these low-income homes. But the problem with that is it's not really happening, because I've talked to people on the ground saying that it's actually really difficult a lot of times to get these people in these homes, because there's also a lot of money to be made in the application process. When you pay $30-40 an application, you can actually just make money by listing that unit and collecting the application fees that come in. That oftentimes is greater than the rent that is going to be collected by housing somebody. So now you've created another loophole in there for people to take advantage of. And it's just kind of stuff like this that happens over and over, where these organizations that exist to help homeless people, there's an industrial complex that's now being put in place, where if they solve this problem, now all of a sudden they're out of their job. And you see some of these the figures of these people that are making 6 figures, almost 7 figures consulting for homeless shelters. It's kind of insane. And that's why the problem is not really getting solved, is because the solution they created is really only a money-making scheme, and it doesn't really actually address the housing problem. And there's no accountability. For example, in LA, there was once, I think that it's sort of being disbanded now because they've been called out by the public so many times, the LA Homeless Services Authority. The head of the Homeless Services Authority was giving money and grants to her husband, who works at a certain homeless shelter, but then they weren't able to show that they were able to house anybody with that money. So there's almost no accountability that's happening. So a lot of the money is going out the door. There's no accountability of how this money is being spent. And that's how you get $24 billion and an increase in the homeless population, is because there's no enforcement mechanism. There's no way to see if anybody's spending the money properly, there was another case of an old motel that was purchased by the city of LA to be used as a homeless shelter, and they actually basically gave a tax write-off to this organization called Path to do it. But then that nobody lives there because you have opposition from the person. This is like kind of insider information from the people on the ground. They're saying that the city councilwoman there doesn't want that homeless shelter to be open because it's in her neighborhood and she doesn't want it there. She doesn't want a homeless shelter there. And so then she's doing all kinds of bureaucratic red tape, not allowing them to open. They're saying, oh, there's permitting issues and this and that. And so it's preventing some of these organizations that want to do good from actually completing that task because there's all these interests that are conspiring against them. And that's kind of the overall, I think, summary of the homeless problem in Los Angeles or California in general, is that nobody's really incentivized to solve the problem. There's no priority to solve the problem. There's only people sticking their hands in the cookie jar to say, okay, I can get money here, I can get money there, and then just letting that problem perpetuate.
Yeah, that's what because I think when you think of $24 billion, I would assume it's more like the motel thing, where you just go, oh, let's buy a motel, or let's find some land and let's build a unique structure that can house a lot of people, that maybe has some counseling, helping you get jobs, and maybe even have transportation into the city for work. Like, there's so many things that you would think. That's so much money.
No, it's so much. And
it's
like I said, the money is going to housing projects that are these like luxury condominiums that are 140 million, $200 million to build, that have like 8 units that are for low income housing. And then on top of that, there are these covenants that are put into place that say, hey, you only need to keep this low income for, let's say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And after that, it becomes market rate. So now these real estate developers has just basically had their project financed by taxpayers, or a lot of it financed by taxpayers, without giving anything back to the community.
So you're saying a lot of these new buildings, there could be 200 units and
Yep.
maybe 20 or 30 are for low income, but that eventually will run out in 5 or 10 years, and then the whole building is at full market value.
Correct.
So they're able to go around and say, hey, I'm doing this to help low income families. But ultimately there's massive profit being made, and the state's basically funding it, or a portion of it.
A portion of, yeah, they're not funding the entire project. They're oftentimes giving them grants, or they're giving them tax breaks based on how many units they offer for low income. But like I said, there's some, and this is not everybody, but there are some nefarious real estate companies that I've talked to a lady who houses or tries to house the homeless VA, and she says over the course of like 7 or 8 years that she's worked with that job, she's never been able to get anybody into housing from this particular property management company, because they just make it impossible, and they're just collecting the application fee. I think it's $35 or $45 per applicant. And if you think, okay, they're going to get like 3 or 4 or 5 applicants a day, that's $3,000 a month, and the unit is renting at $2,000.
They're just running it.
If I was a businessman, I would say, well, let's just keep this empty and we'll just rake in the application fees.
And then what's the thing that I can't understand is why there aren't more people. I know there's red tape, but how has everything become so corrupt? Like, every time I go, oh, I'm good for a while, and then I see a video and I do my research and I go, this too? Like, how do we have so many people that work their way into all these industries? And they do it in food, they probably do it in pharma, they do it with war, they do it with everything. And like, where are the good people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think to me, that boils down to kind of a broader question of American culture and morals, and what do we stand for? What does it mean to be an American? I think that's the question that I would ask, because it seems to me the only thing right now that's tying us all together is our love for making money. That seems to be a common thread that we can really pull, and everybody agrees, like, yeah, let's go out there, hustle, get yours, kind of thing. But there's nothing more than that say, okay, do we have any other shared values? Because it used to be, like it or not, it used to be like, hey, you are a Christian, and you also white. That's a common thread, that kind of a unity for the country. But now we're saying, okay, we want to do away with some of the racial and religious stuff. We want to say, hey, everybody's welcome here, which is great. But then what's the common thread that's pulling us together? And that's what happens. This is me learning in business school, is that, okay, we're going to everybody is going to prioritize profit above every single other value that you might have. That's what it comes to. When you make the final decision, you say, hey, is this profitable or not? Then you start to do that at every single interaction that you make. Let's say not even at the highest level. Let's say you're the CEO and you're making big financial decisions for your company. That's one level that's talked about a lot. But what we don't talk about a lot is the people at the lower levels, the middle management, the lower management, the employees. Every interaction that you have, let's say even with your boss, let's say you work at a gas station and your manager is trying to get the most out of you while giving you the least amount of reward, and vice versa. And so then everybody's gaming that at every single level. And that's when you kind of have a breakdown of like, okay, that's why things are worse now today, because everybody's trying to pay people less and make them work more. Or here in this situation, we're talking about homeless, we're trying to get as much money as possible while providing the least amount of service that we can get away with, because we don't necessarily want to do that. And then we essentially build this kind of industrial complex where it's all about making money instead of the original mission, which is like, oh, we should house people, we should solve this homeless problem, or we should, even the most famous industrial complex, like the war machine, right? We want to build these weapons to keep the nation safe so we can defend ourselves against invaders. So we need these weapons, we need soldiers and these kinds of things. But now it's like, okay, now we need to create wars to service the industry that we've created. And this is the same thing here in the homeless. Is like, we now need the homeless to service this huge, billion-dollar industry that we have of consultants and homeless shelters and politicians and real estate developers, so then they can all get their cut, and that's all predicated upon there being homeless people.
Today's episode is sponsored by NFM Lending. If you are a first-time home buyer, if you are looking to refinance your current mortgage, or you want to buy a second home or investment property, you want to talk to a lender so you can get your financial ducks in a row and get yourself a great deal. I've been working with NFM Lending for nearly 2 years now. They're my go-to lender, and they are because they're so thorough. They educate you through the process, and it's just an absolute wonderful company. They operate in 49 states, so every state except New York. So if you live in any of the other states, you can contact NFM Lending, and they can put a roadmap together and help you get into the home of your dreams, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. My recommendation that I've been doing on TikTok that I share with everybody is, if you're looking to buy a home in the next 6 to 12 months, I would recommend talking to them today, this week, this month, so you can put a plan together. You can talk about your debt to income. You can talk about your credit score. You can talk about rate buy downs. You can talk about VA loans. You can talk about conventional loans, but really get the education in a 15 to 30 minute conversation so you can put a roadmap together. So when you're ready to buy that home in 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, you've made the right financial decisions leading up to buying that house. So you can go to nfmlending.com/Freddie Smith. You can fill out the questionnaire. They will get in contact with you, and you can put a roadmap together. So again, that's nfmlending.com/Freddie Smith, and they will help you out. Now back to the show. Do you feel that this is something that the government should get involved with to try and stop all of this? Like, whose job is it to stop all of this bullshit that's going on in all these industries?
It's supposed to be the government, and I'm honestly not a big government guy either. I'm just for the government doing what it's supposed to do, which is to provide for its citizens, to protect the common, if you go back to the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, these type of documents, to provide for the common welfare. And what's happening now is they've become co-opted by various interests. Like, if you can give people money, if Freddie Smith is a multi-billionaire, if you want to end property taxes in Florida, I've heard you talking about this kind of thing, you could probably end property tax. You could probably influence your representative to say, yeah, property taxes are a bad idea. Whether or not people agree with you or not, you have that power to do it. And that happens across all the different industries, to say, okay, well, I like, private schools, so we're going to do more private schools. Or I like, I want glyphosate in the food supply because it makes it easier to grow crops, and it reduces my cost. So I'm going to say glyphosate is where, is our solution to the food insecurity issues that we might experience in this country. And so you have that power. So when basically billionaires start to control policy making, you then start to have an erosion of morals, because then what does the country stand for? So then it's just money. If you have the money, then you have the policy, which is different in some other country. For example, I'll bring up China as an example. Good or bad about China, there's a lot of bad things I would say about that country. But one of the good things is that even if you're a billionaire, you do not override the culture and the politics of the Communist Party. You're not bigger than the Communist Party. You still have to go along with whatever directives, the policies that they have. But here we're seeing in every administration, whether it be the Trump administration or the Biden administration, or the going back to Obama, if you have enough wealth, you're basically starting to influence the way they make policies. It's not like, oh, Trump like you can see with the tariffs, right? Trump clearly wanted to do tariffs, but now he's getting pushback from industry people saying, no, don't do the tariffs. And now he's not doing the tariffs anymore. And and you could like it or not like it, but that's certainly what happened. I mean, he basically lost that battle against the overwhelming interests of the powerful, the business interests overrode his desire to do the tariffs. And I think that's overall not good. And to kind of just summarize how I feel about the government, they should go back to doing what they do well, which is like, hey, do we have good roads? Do we have good public infrastructure? And do away with some of these other programs that I think that are not necessary. You don't need this like huge bureaucratic bloat. Because oftentimes that's another issue that I've looked into is like why does the bureaucracy keep growing? Why is the government growing faster than the population? It's because if you think about how you get promoted at your job, you get promoted when there's like people working under you. Like you start as an associate or a coordinator, then you go to being a manager and then a senior director, these kinds of, but you have to have people below you. So then you start growing and finding a need for your team to grow. It's like, oh, I need a coordinator. So now I'm a manager of this coordinator. And now that coordinator maybe wants to get promoted in a year. Okay, well then we're going to have a junior coordinator come in to do something. So then that's how you get the size of the government and any kind of bureaucracy to grow. And so that's where I'll say, like, I actually am fine with the concept of Doge. I think most people would agree, yeah, there's too much crap in the government that we don't know what the hell's going on. But then the problem is, I think, just objectively speaking, that the way they were doing it was too chaotic. It wasn't like a focused plan. It was all over the place. So then that makes people lose confidence in what is going on. And ultimately, I think we need to restore somehow confidence that the government is doing the right things and has our best interests in mind, or we're going to see a continued erosion of people just kind of just trying to taking what they can and just being like vultures, like, oh, if I can make money here, I'm just going to make money real quick. And that happens, to tie it back to the conversation about independent creators is like, okay, if the whole thing is going to shit, well, if the Democratic Party offers me $15,000 to do one post, I'm going to take $15,000. I'm going to say Kamala Harris is the greatest thing since, sliced bread. That's, if I don't have the confidence that this thing is going to continue, then we're all kind of out for ourselves. I don't know if you feel that way, Freddie, but that's kind of my biggest fear, is that everybody's going to become super black pilled and not care about anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's worst case scenario.
Yeah.
We're already losing some hope, and even things like you mentioned with Doge, you couldn't have pinpointed better. I was actually going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was so pumped with government spending being cut. I go, oh, this is right in my wheelhouse, and I started doing research, and I was so interested of what this was going to be. And what a shit show. I just feel like every day it was like it was just so chaotic that even with my research, I was like, what's true, what's not, what are you cutting, what payments went out, what didn't come out, and it just got super messy. But I love the concept of hunkering down on getting rid of all of this bureaucracy. And really, I'm more of a if the state had power kind of vibe. I think the federal government just got too big, and that's why we're fighting with each other. I wish it would have more power in the state. Like I even floated an idea once, which sounds crazy, but if it was flip-flopped, where if we had to pay taxes, imagine it was done through the state, but only the sales tax was done through the federal government. It's like, just protect us and protect the Constitution, and then let the states collect everything and handle everything else, because I feel like it would help us really care about local politics more. But like you said, I don't want it to get to a point where people are just like, fuck it, I'm going to ride this out till the wheels fall off because I don't have any hope left. And that's why I'm really just hoping something in the next couple years will change and bring us together. But
that's totally what I'm hoping for as well, which is what I try to do with the content that I make. I make a focus of not trying to do any kind of partisan videos, even videos that are political and partisan in nature. I try to I try to make it in a way where hopefully everybody can consume it and not be triggered. And I want to bring this unifying force to say, hey, we're all in it together. There's no, red America, blue America, this kind of thing. It's like we're just here to be Americans. That's one of the biggest kind of questions that I continue to have that I brought up earlier with you. It's like, how do we find some common threads that connect us all? The people living in this country. I'm hoping to do my small part in in not dividing us further at the very least, and trying to bring us together and say, hey, we may not we didn't grow up together in the same neighborhood. We may not look the same, but we have these shared values. We all want to work hard. We all want to do good for our community. We all don't like corruption, these kinds of things, these kind of common ideals that we can come around. And hopefully enough of people see the value in that hopefully inspires other people to make videos of their own to do the same things. That's what I'm hoping for.
Dude, that's what's beautiful. And I love that you mentioned that about not going too far left or too far right, because then you get labeled and it instantly you become a friend or an enemy instantly. And that's why I try to stay in the center, because I don't want people to get distracted. I want you to see this information and see these facts, because whether you're red or blue, we have to pay our bills. We got to live somewhere. We got to eat food. We need health care. We all do share that. But I think mentioning that the thing we kind of share is like making money, and how weird that when money started getting tight, we started to divide, because I feel like us being prosperous and having the freedom to prosper, the American dream, was what brought all these different cultures together. And now that after COVID, the middle class, the American dream is now suffering, and you're seeing the divide. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing that we're all bound by money, but I think in a positive way, we were bound by the freedom to prosper, that everyone could do well, and that's something special. Like for someone who's sitting there just being like, I see the corruption, I'm kind of feeling like, well, what can I do? Do you have any advice for folks that for us not to feel down, but to kind of feel like we're rallying and inspired to do something? Do you have a direction that you could point somebody?
Yeah, I can only give my personal experience about what I do, because me being inundated with this stuff all day definitely doesn't always put my mental state in the most optimal position, because I'm always reading about corruption. I'm reading about people, screwing other people, and all kinds of, war, all these terrible things. But I think what I try to do is center myself in the community around me, the people directly around you. You want to make the life of the people around you the best way. You want to make the people's lives around you the best you can possibly make, because that's what you can actually affect the change on. So when I go out and let's say I've made it a point in my life to say, okay, I need to take care of myself. So I'm working out, 5 times a week. And I'm eating well, I'm eating real food, because if I don't take care of myself, I really can't take care of other people. And then secondly, when I do go out, let's say I want to enjoy a nice restaurant, I want to do this and that, I make sure that the money that I spend comes back to the community. So I'm choosing the restaurant, say, hey, is this a local restaurant? Is this not like a McDonald's or a Burger King kind of thing? If it's like, if I'm going to have that kind of food, which I'm totally fine with, like eating hamburgers, I mean, that's good. I mean, I enjoy it. I'm going to try to go to a chain that not a chain, but a local restaurant that's like only here in San Diego where I live. Or I'm going to go to a local taqueria. Instead of going to Taco Bell, I'm going to go to my local taqueria down the street that's owned by a nice Mexican family. That is kind of the things that we can do. And also then building the community around you. I would say the third thing is, I don't know exactly. Some people call it mutual aid. I just call it like community, where it's like, hey, let's, instead of like making everything about like money. So for example, nowadays, if you have a dog and let's say you're going to be out all day, you're going to go on an app, or you're going to go to WAG or whatever, and you're going to pay a dog walker to walk your dog. And now you're feeding into, like, there's cuts of money coming out. There's going to go to the programmers. There's going to go to the various technologies that are servicing the app, and only a little bit is going to go to a dog walker. So either you go to a local person and say, hey, can you watch my dog and I'll pay you X amount of money, or you just take turns watching each other's dogs. You just have, it's like, I'll watch your dog when you're gone and you watch mine when I'm here. And now you've removed yourself from this kind of money-making system. And you say, hey, we're going to go back to what we used to do in the past, which is like, oh, I'm out of sugar. I'm going to go to my next door neighbor and say, hey, do you have some extra sugar or whatever? And we need to bring back that. And I think once people start talking to each other again, I think that's one of the downsides of COVID is, regardless of how you feel about the lockdowns and everything like that, it made us all kind of fear each other. And it's like, oh, that person is now dangerous because they could kill you, because they could have the virus. And that certainly had profound impact on my mental state, and that I was suddenly afraid of people, and I didn't want to do that. So now I make it a point. It's like you need to go out and talk to people, and get to have real conversations again, and go back to building connection, because I think we've just lost a lot of the connection that we used to have. And when people aren't talking, they're more likely to screw people over. And that's why corporate CEOs, because everybody's just a spreadsheet, a number on a spreadsheet. And so it's really easy to get rid of people like that and not have any humanity. But if you are working, if we're best friends, and I have to fire you, I'm like, well, do I really want to fire Freddie? I don't, he's a pretty good guy. And there's starts to be more, at least more balance in the decision making versus like just going off of your numbers. There needs to be some other checklist that you go down. It's like, okay, yeah, I like Freddie, but he like doesn't do anything. Hey, like, he doesn't work his job. So yes, I do have to eventually fire him, but at least I'm looking at more things other than like, oh, I need to hit this number by the end of the year. So Freddie makes X amount. I got to get rid of Freddie. And that's from personal experience. I literally did a project where we went through a spreadsheet of all the different people's positions and say, all right, we need to get down to this number. And so who's expendable here? We don't know. And we don't know anything about anybody's job. We just have their name, their title, and how much they make. And then we need to reshuffle that and say, okay, we need to get down to this number, and that's it. And I've done that, and that doesn't mean only just people. We've done that. I did that with inventory. That was one of my specializations. Was like, okay, how much inventory do we need? And I would literally be on the phone with manufacturing sites, and this was like important stuff during COVID. This is, because we had a lot of shortages, and the people on the line were like, if you cut any more of our inventory to hit your bottom line number at the end of the year, we're at risk of like shutting down the manufacturing site, because then we're gonna go out of stock, and all these bad things can happen. But if you don't call those people up, you have no idea. You just say, I need to get to this number, and so I'm gonna get there.
So you really saw the gutting from the inside happen.
Oh yeah, and that's one of the things I actually made, I would say, pretty good money doing consulting work, but it just didn't feel good. Like going to work every day was kind of a drag. I had to drag myself out of bed. I was feeling not motivated, and I just didn't want to live my life like that. And so therefore I just, found something. I wanted to do something else, and hopefully contribute positively to society. I don't know if I'm always doing that, because I get a lot of comments from both sides, because I am kind of in the middle in a lot of ways, because I'm kind of open-minded to say, okay, maybe we could try this. Like, okay, because I'll hear people, it's like, okay, you want to gut the Department of Education? Okay, well, tell me why you want to gut it. And a lot of, I would say more on the liberal side would be like, oh my God, we can't cut the Department of Education. But I would say, well, let me hear you out. And so I get fired from both sides. People call me like schizophrenic. They're like, this guy, I don't understand like his ideology. Because at one point, sometimes he's good on this issue, and now he's like entertaining Elon Musk. And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to figure out what the facts are here. So of course I'm going to do that. But I think that's where people are thinking like, hey, you're either with us or you're against us, and that's the kind of thinking I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah, and I think that's why you're so impactful, though, because if you are someone, and this is what I encourage a lot of people to do, even if you can't stand the other side, understanding them is going to help you even make better arguments, maybe for it or against it. So that's, I think, really important. And I also think it's the government's job or the media's job to do a lot more education. I think that's why the independent journalism is also getting bigger, because it's education. When's the last time you saw someone with a dry erase board in the Oval Office going, all right, here's what this is, here's what we're going to do, or a politician going, we want free health care, but here's what we spend now, here's who would be hurt by it, here's how we would help those people, like bring us through. There's no education. It's just like, this is good or bad, go out there and spread good or bad without any sort of education. Like I've tried so hard to do a video on what it would really cost and for like universal health care. It's a huge project. I need like a team of people to try to break all this down to really put a video together of like how this would work or not work. Yeah. So I just wish that the media and politicians and people in government would just do more education so that we can just learn and be open-minded, and it would work so much better.
Exactly. And I mean, that's true, I would say, bipartisanship, is to just educate people on the issue without the injection of like, oh, is this going to be bad for my party or not, right? Because, oh, my party is more of the free market, so we don't want regulation. But then you do need some regulation, right? It's like, we need to educate, okay, here's what happens let's say even on a topic that I've looked into recently on glyphosate, which is like a chemical pesticide that we spray on a lot of our crops, 60% of our crops. We should do an education to say, hey, this is what's happening. These are potentially the health effects of it, but this is the plus side. This is we get X amount of extra yield in crops, and we can grow food more efficiently. But people don't do those stories because then it looks bad on one side. Like they don't want. So, for example, the liberal media won't do a story on glyphosate because now it's seen as helping RFK Jr. and RFK Jr. is kind of the enemy. So we don't want to even talk about that issue. Like we want to highlight, like more recently, like he just got rid of food dyes, which is good. But he also, set up this thing where he's going to look into autism, and they just say, "Oh, look at this guy. He's disparaging autistic people and this and that," and you don't hear about the food dye thing at all, because that's not what the education they want to do. They just want to create these kinds of partisan divides where you can't like claim a win. You can't give people the information because they might vote for that guy later. Maybe they might. We don't want that, so then they just omit that information completely.
And it's just it's exhausting. I don't think Americans, when they're trying to take care of their job, their families, should have to go spend even an hour a day to look through the news and research. Like, you should be a country where you can turn it on for 30 minutes or read the newspaper and get unbiased, here's what's going on, and then move about your life. I feel like this, maybe because we're in this world, but I feel like I can't go on TikTok or go anywhere without it being about politics. Like, we've gotten so far away from just life.
Right. And we don't know, and I have to check multiple sources because I know that the New York Times is only going to provide one perspective. They're not going to provide the more neutral perspective where it's like, okay, this is good and this is bad. It's always, it's hyper sensationalized. This is really bad. And then you have to go to multiple sources to figure out whether or not something is true. Like, is Trump really rounding up U.S. citizens and sending them to El Salvador? I'm not sure, because that's what I hear. But then I look through the data and then it's like, oh, Obama also deported a bunch or mistakenly arrested a bunch of U.S. citizens throughout his tenure. But we didn't hear about that because there wasn't this political narrative behind it. Now there is, and now we're hearing about every single case of like mistaken identity and this and that. And so I'm trying to understand, okay, are we going down a fascist road, or is this just the media kind of ginning up this narrative to say we're going down this fascist road? And that's the confusing part that I'm trying to delineate, hopefully for the audience to say, okay, is this what's happening here? And that's kind of, because if you go back 100 years to read the New York Times, the headlines are just like, here's what happened. It's not like so-and-so did bad thing and now we're fucked.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I see it all the time. Even the flip-flopping, when you look at past clips from politicians on both sides of the aisle, they're like championing something in the 90s, early 2000s. Now they're completely against it. And then they're like switching it. And it's such a mess.
It's a huge, I mean, the way we make decisions now is not good, because this is a joke that I saw on Twitter, but they said that the fastest way to make people anti-vax now, and I'm sorry to bring up such a triggering topic, the fastest way to make people anti-vax is that Elon Musk buys Pfizer. Elon Musk buys Pfizer. Then people are like, we don't like Elon, so we don't like these things anymore. And that's not how we should make decisions. We should look at medication and say, is this good or not for the body, and whether or not we want to take it. And we should do science in that way versus like, oh, we don't like this scientist, so we don't listen to anything that he says.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, man. And I think too, we got to give ourselves some credit, anyone who's doing independent journalism, because it's been 100 years of mainstream. And now over the past only 5 years, it's really had an uptick. And look at the progress so many independent journalists have made of just having these conversations. And I just really appreciate what you do, man. I love learning from you. You're someone that I trust, and I love seeing it and keeping my mind, full of the good information on both sides so I can make a decision. And so I just want you to keep it up, dude. You're doing such a good job, and I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me. And I know we're almost up on time here. Is there Is there a place that you want that people can find you?
Yeah. Well, first off, I appreciate you having me on and all the kind words, and right back at you as well. Like I've been seeing your stuff for many years, and the breakdowns are so easy for people to understand. They're like, hey, this is what it was in 1980. Here's what it is in 2025. You kind of, that you can see the numbers for yourself and the situation that we're in. So I appreciate you kind of doing that content to make things digestible for people, and that's hopefully what I try to do as well. Is take something sort of complex and try to distill it down to its core components to say, hey, this is what's happening. Do you like this or you don't like this? But yeah, people can follow me. If you, I would say like YouTube is the place that I'm trying to centralize things a little bit more, where I can post like longer form stuff as well as my shorts as well. Now that YouTube has expanded their shorts to more than or to 3 minutes now, so I can start posting on there. So that's where everything is going to live. But I'm huge. I mean, the biggest platform I have is currently on TikTok, but that's, you never know when that's going to go away, right? That's still quite up in the air.
Yeah.
So I would say Instagram is another good place to follow me, as well as X, and they're all the same handle at 5149 5149 James Lee, Lee spelled with an I. So same handle across all the platforms. Do appreciate your support, because I think independent journalism, I want to stay independent forever, and part of that is having the support from the people who watch the videos and consume the videos. That's the only way independent journalists can stay independent, versus eventually taking some big fat check from traditional media and then pretending to be independent. That's not why I got in the game, and that's not where I want to go. So I appreciate everybody's support.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. I'm wishing you a great week, and then we'll have to hop back on and chop it up again sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks, Freddie. Yeah, definitely appreciate you.